Welcome to the PrePost Film Review. I'm John Asquith.
And I'm Matt Stevenson. So the way things work here at PrePost is that you're going to hear two distinct periods of time within the podcast. So the first part of the podcast, John and myself are going to chat about a trailer. This episode we're going to be talking about the film It. So that part of the podcast is going to be spoiler free. We're just going to be chatting about what our impressions are, what we kind of expect the film to be like based on the trailers that we've watched. Then it's going to jump forward in time, and we're going to do a full review of the film itself once we've seen it. This part of the podcast is going to be chock full of spoilers, so don't listen to the second part until you've seen the film, because you'll get everything spoiled for you and you'll be very, very annoyed at us. So let's hear what we have to say about the trailer for It.
I think the universe revolves around you. They think that you'll always be protected and cared for. Then, one day, you realize that's not true. Because when you're alone as a kid, the monsters see you as weaker. You don't even know they're getting closer. Till it's too late. Here, take it.
My grandfather thinks this town is cursed.
Alright, so we've just watched two trailers for the new Stephen King adaptation, It. We watched the teaser trailer and I think it's like the official trailer one or official first trailer.
Yeah.
John, you're a big Stephen King fan. You've read the book, It. I have not. I'm curious to hear, I guess, first what your experience with It. I mean, I'm curious to hear what your experience is in terms of the book, whether you've seen the previous TV film adaptation, and what your expectations are based on this new trailer that we've just watched, or new trailers that we've just watched.
Okay. Well, let's go through that list. Yeah, I am a big Stephen King fan, and in particular of the book It. It is the first Stephen King book I read, I believe, which is quite a mammoth task. It's like over 1,000 pages long. But my dad is a big Stephen King fan. And so when I was little, I was always sort of fascinated with, he'd have all these books on his bedside table, Stephen King books, and they'd always have, creepy covers and weird descriptions on the background. So I had sort of a fascination with the books. Long before I was really reading properly. And it was one that always stood out to me because it had this sewer drain on the front with like a red balloon coming out of it and like a mangled sort of claw rising up out of the drain. And then reading on the back that it was sort of about these teenagers that get terrorized. It was always really fascinating to me. So that was the first one I sort of picked from my dad's Stephen King library. I mean, he had like every book, basically. That was the first one I picked, and I was probably 13 or so when I read it, and it was just the perfect age to relate to a lot of the stuff that happens in the story. It's sort of about being a teenager, growing up, being a bit of a nerd, a bit of a loser. A good friend of mine was reading the book at the same time, and we sort of took a lot of the language from the book and applied it to our own little high school group, because we were sort of the misfits and the nerdy boys. So it has quite a personal sort of connection to me as a book. But that doesn't mean I'm just going to blindly like any adaptation of it. I have seen the 90s adaptation. I think it's pretty good for the time. I can't remember exactly, but it was pretty early 90s, and it was made for TV. So they couldn't push the boundaries that much, and I think considering those constraints, they did a relatively good job. It's pretty cheesy, but it still hit on... The stuff with the kids especially is quite good. It still hits on that that idea of being a bit of an outcast and growing up in a small town and where there's something a bit wrong under the surface. I think it's good. It doesn't hold up that well, but I think for the time they did a good job. So now onto this adaptation. I think this looks really good, particularly the teaser trailer that we watched. It's not a teaser trailer, it goes for 2.5 minutes. So let's just try not to bitch about that too much. Just don't call it a teaser trailer. But I think that does a really good job of setting up the basic premise and giving a glimpse of some of the horrors to come. And some of them look very effectively shot and carried out. There's the sort of infamous opening of the book and the miniseries, and obviously this movie where Georgie, the younger brother of one of the characters, is sailing his boat down the stormy street, and it goes down into the drain, and that's the first sort of reveal of Pennywise, and that kicks off the whole story. I think that looks really well done. It's a bit weird that he knocks his head. I don't know why. That's kind of like funny.
Did make me laugh. It's like slap.
Yeah, I think everyone will have that reaction to it. So I sort of hope that's not in the movie. That feels a bit weird, but I just like the imagery of that scene. I think in general, Pennywise the clown looks freaking terrifying. It looks like they're still keeping a lot of that stuff about being an outcast, being a loser, banding together as a group of friends. So I think it looks really good. As you say, though, we also watched the official first trailer. Whatever the difference is between these, how they name them, who knows. But that one isn't edited as well, just as a trailer. It sort of feels a bit rushed. It doesn't build up tension as the other trailer does. And it makes some of the scares look a bit cheap. And a bit like they show too much. So that lowers my expectations a little bit, that maybe this won't be sort of a mixture of a teenage drama with some horror. It might be more a jump scare horror movie with a couple of sort of teenage coming of age things thrown in. I'm not sure which way it will go, but I do think, at least in a production sense, it looks like it's executed well and shot well, and the performances I think are going to be pretty good. Looks like they got a good cast of kids there. So overall, my expectations are pretty high, I would say, and I'm really looking forward to checking this out. So that's my sort of long-winded explanation of my relationship with it. What are your thoughts, Matt, having not read the book and just seeing this trailer? Have you seen the miniseries?
No, I have like zero relationship with this property at all. I'm like hearing you talk about the opening, the infamous opening. I had no idea that's how it opened. I'm going in completely blind. Yeah. Which I think is potentially a good thing. I have no idea what to expect other than the iconic images from the 90s film, I guess, of like Tim Roth as the Tim Curry, sorry, as the creepy clown boy. Though right off the bat, I guess the only one thing I did notice is that Pennywise in this version looks very young. I don't know if I like that. Like he does, he looks like a kid in clown makeup, and I don't know if that's part of the book. I don't know, but I feel like there's something about that that's less scary than like a predatory man as a clown. Even though he does look very creepy, I agree the design is very good, but I find it odd that they cast someone so young as Pennywise. Anyway, having said that, I think this looks really good. And I 100% agree with you about the first trailer looking much better than the second. I feel like we talk about this a lot in terms of big or big-ish budget horror films not ever being made. And this looks like a big budget horror film, which is so rare. I mean, we keep saying it's rare, but I feel like we talk about like every few episodes because there is one to talk about. But it's rare in comparison to other genres, I feel like. And this looks like well made, well shot. It looks like the production design looks amazing. Like the old like decrepit house and things.
Yeah,
it looks great. So that makes me very excited. I think there's kind of like a little bit of 80s nostalgia fatigue for me. Like there's shots of the kids riding up the street on their bikes, which is like straight out of Stranger Things, which is straight out of E.T. And I know Stranger Things is a bad example because that is just ripping off things like this, and it's probably unfair because it's
bad timing.
Exactly, because it is set then legitimately and was published well before this nostalgic craze sort of swept through prestige TV and film. But like you said, perhaps it's just bad timing. Yeah.
An interesting point on that, Matt, is that the book is set in the kids are teenagers in the 50s. And then they come back as adults in the 80s. And this has come forward. You know, this is I don't know if we've said this on the podcast, but we've talked about it privately, that the 80s is the new 50s, right? The 80s is the nostalgic time that everyone looks back on now. This has come forward to that shift. So the kids are teenagers in the 80s and they come back as
John,
now.
now you're making me like it less. Like, I would have much preferred that. Imagine how cool that would be if it was like the kids in the 50s and the adults in the 80s. Oh, that makes me a little bit sad. But, you know, I guess it's I mean, it's not betraying the concept
it still
of the
works.
book. Exactly.
Yeah.
And it just happens to be tapping into the zeitgeist. Everyone loves a fucking 80s nostalgia trip at the moment. So that would be one minor criticism. But other than that, I think it looks great. The only thing I would say is to echo what you said about the second trailer. It makes me a little bit concerned that some of the scares aren't as elegant as the first trailer sort of suggests that they could be. And you're right, the second trailer feels very choppy and it doesn't build suspense. I mean, it tries to build suspense superficially by using like the repetition of that "you'll float too" line, like building to some sort of intense climax, but it doesn't really work. It's all surface, and you're right, it just sort of like kills the scares by over exposing the creepy, quote unquote creepy aspect of it. Whereas the first one was much more restrained. I'm hoping the film is more like the first trailer than the second trailer. Yeah. But I don't know, I think my expectations are quite high for this. Even if it is like the second trailer and doesn't execute the scares that well, and even if it is a bit 80s nostalgia-esque, I think the level of production design and the look and feel of it will be enough for me to enjoy this. Yeah, like some of the imagery looks amazing. There's like the creepy hands coming around the door, and this weird like glowing-eyed figure behind the plastic sheets, and like looks amazing. Really, really amazing. So even just on a superficial level, I'm really looking forward to just, you know, experiencing the visuals of this film. I think it looks great.
Yeah, no, I totally agree, and I think this probably goes back to something we bring up a lot, that, I mean, I haven't seen the movie yet, obviously, but it feels like it's coming from an honest place where they really like the source material and they're trying to do it justice, and so they've put effort into these details, and it's not just a cynical sort of cash grab or something like that. I hope that's true. Turns out to be true.
Bill, if you will come with me, you'll float too.
George. I saw something.
The clown. Yeah, I saw him too. You'll float too.
What happens when another Georgie goes missing? Or one of us?
You'll float too.
Are you just gonna pretend it isn't happening like everyone else in this town? If we stick together, we'll win.
Okay, John, we are here in the sewer with our little red balloon. We've just seen It. We were pretty high on it from the trailer. looked like a nice sort of counterpoint to The Dark Tower, which we both didn't like. This looked like it could have been a good Stephen King adaptation. So I'm very curious, given that you're a big fan of the book, did this hold up for you? And was it better than the Dark Tower adaptation that we just watched?
Well, I'll just jump straight in and say, yeah, it is better than the Dark Tower, definitely.
Bar wasn't very high, was it? Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think anyone could argue with that. And I think I really enjoyed this movie. I liked it quite a lot. I thought this was a very solid adaptation of the book. I think it is a little by the numbers at times, and it doesn't necessarily do too much that's new or interesting. But yeah, as I say, solid is probably the word I would most used to describe this movie. I think it hits all the beats that it needs to. It's got some interesting, creepy stuff. The relationship between the kids is probably the highlight. And as it is in the book, I would say, and they really, really nail that. That's definitely the strongest aspect of the movie, I think, is their friendship and their banter and how they sort of come together. I really, really liked all of that stuff. I think it does weirdly, it does an interesting job with the scares, but it doesn't do a scary job. I wasn't scared watching this movie, Matt. So I was a little disappointed about that. I think probably the scariest scene is the opening scene with Georgie in the sewer. And even that tension builds to a certain point, and then it shows some fangs and CGI face, and from then on, every time you kind of see Pennywise in some form, it never really builds to a scare. He's just there and he jumps out, or he appears in some form, so when I say interesting, I love the design. I really like the design of all his different incarnations, and the house, the haunted house, and like the stuff in the sewer. It all looked really cool and was very inventive, but it was almost like an adventure or a fantasy movie where you just see it and it's just there and you take it in. It never built up or kept things in the shadows much. So I never really felt scared, but that wasn't too much of a detriment to me because the kids' stuff was so strong. And I also really, really liked the cinematography in general. I thought this was really, really well shot and had felt very 80s without being too sycophantic like maybe Stranger Things could be at times. I think this felt a little more honest to me than something like Stranger Things. Even though I like that show, I just don't love it as much as some people. So yeah, without going into too many more specifics, I'm generally really positive. I came out really high from it because I love the book so much, and so just seeing it well done, I was like, that was amazing. And I think in the week since I've come down a little bit, but overall still very, very positive. So I'm curious, really curious to hear what you think, Matt, because you don't have that attachment, which I have, and I sort of gave it probably some leeway because of that.
I think that is the perfect way of sort of describing how we're going to differ a little bit, because we're kind of pretty much on the same page. I would say overall I liked this film, and like you, I enjoyed it quite a bit while I was watching it, but I think it's sort of lessened the further I've gotten away from it. Though I still think it's a decent film, like it's good. But I think perhaps the like nostalgic appreciate, or just your love for the source material perhaps held it up a little bit higher for you. I'd probably put it like a peg down to begin with, and then it's kind of deteriorated a little bit from that. But having said that, like it was a fun 2 hours in the cinema. I enjoyed my time.
It is a really fun movie, as dark as it is. I think that's a great word. It's like a ride, I say, an adventure almost.
And you're exactly right about the scares. Like they're not super inventive in any way, or there's no build to them, but they're kind of just schlocky fun. Like at the beginning when little Georgie or whatever gets bitten or whatever for the first time, and it just tears his bloody arm off, and it's just
and it just shows you.
I knew I was like at least going to have fun with the film when that happened at the very beginning, because usually that sort of stuff, you don't mutilate a child in that obvious way. I think that's kind of representative of how it deals with the horror throughout the whole thing, which I am actually curious. Perhaps we can delve into this a little bit later, but is that representative of the way the horror is in the book as well? Because of the little Stephen King that I've read, I feel like that's quite sort of accurate. Like the books that I've read haven't been very scary. They're more almost kind of like fun scary. But maybe that's just the few that I've read. I don't know if the book version of it is the same. Is that got a similar sense of
I think
horror?
pretty much. I think that the book is a little creepier because you've got more time with the characters and more. They don't just have one encounter, one set piece encounter. They have lots of little subtle ones as well, and those little ones are creepy, and it goes into the history of the town and all the weird stuff, and so it builds this aura of creepiness a bit better than the movie just didn't have time to do.
Which I felt watching it. I feel like the parts that I liked best were the creepy like world building of the town. You know, there's sort of like, I wish there was more of that, because there's only a couple of hints of it throughout. And actually, just to get specific for a second, my favourite moment in the whole film was when one of the boys is at the library and he's like researching the history of the town, and then he starts flipping the pages, and it's the same photo of the like I can't remember what the photo is, but there's something up in the tree, and it's just getting
like a tree,
closer and closer and closer. I mean, I think that the end photo when it reveals that it's a child's head is a bit like, it looks too clear, you know, it's like it's a nitpick, you know, it should be like a bit more blurry, would have been creepier. But that's beside the point. The whole thing is creepy, but the best part of it is like out of focus in the background is the librarian woman just staring, like standing really weirdly and just staring at the boy as he was doing it.
I didn't even notice that. That's really cool.
Creepy. Yeah, it was so creepy. And then after it sort of reveals and it cuts back and the background is in focus, she's moved and she's just like sitting down at the desk again. I thought that was the most effective moment and the creepiest moment in the whole film. But yeah, I wish there was more of that, because like you said, the other stuff, it does feel like you said, it's very specific. Each kid gets like their one scare moment, and then they sort of all go to the house. And I kind of like never really understood the kind of logic or the mechanics of how this creature was working, or what was going on with the town. And maybe that is going to be explained in the part 2 or whatever, chapter 2. But I didn't sort of get. I mean, it was meant to be that he was like sort of feeding on all children, but then these ones were sort of the only ones that seemed to be seeing things, really. And like, was he literally eating them, or was he feeding off their fear? And then why was there kids floating in the air at the end like that? But I had no idea what was going on there. It was all very weird. And not necessarily in a weird, like, cosmic-y, spooky way. It felt... The rest of the film was so literal that when things like that happened, I was just like, what? You know, it sort of took me out a little bit. But yeah, anyway, in general, if you sort of ignore all of that sort of stuff and just go along with the ride, mate, you know, often hate it when people sort of say that, turn your brain off. I'm not saying turn your brain off, but, you know, if you're just willing to not analyse some of the plot holes or plot mechanics, I think it's a fun, like you said, very well shot. It looks beautiful. Very fun. Biggish budget, which we always sort of lament that there's not more of. Biggish budget horror film. Very much, and I agree, very much in the vein of Stranger Things, but perhaps, like you said, a little bit less latched onto the 80s nostalgia. Though there are a couple of moments in there that maybe hammer that a little hard, but... there definitely are, but... Yeah, sorry, did you have more? No, that's pretty much overall what I felt. But I'm curious specifically what you thought of Pennywise and the Sarsgaard, the young actor who they chose to play him. Did you think it was an effective performance?
Yeah, I think he did a freaking awesome job. He was so good. All the subtle things that he would do with his face, minus when they put effects on top, but he'd have this boyish grin and then this deadpan stare, and then like often, I guess because he was getting hungry, he'd have this slobber drool coming down. It was so creepy. And occasionally he'd have like a weird twitch, you know, like this evil presence within is just waiting to burst out, but he has to take his time and stuff like that. I think he was fantastic, and that's where I do wish that they had a little more of build up and keeping him in the shadows, because just him talking and half seeing his face in that opening is very creepy and effective. And they sort of push him out very quickly into being a clown, and being a bit almost goofy at times. And that stuff never works just for me on a personal level. I mean, I know it's like a psychotic clown thing, but it gets a bit too kid-ish or something, like a kid's horror movie when he's like laughing, and you know, there's this one scene where he like the wall bursts down and he's like doing a little dance and stuff, and it's weird. The image of it is very weird and unsettling. I can see what they were going for, but I prefer when he's talking and hiding and doing his little, you know, more subtle things. Anyway, that's my, I guess, roundabout way of saying that I think he was fantastic. It was more some of the directing choices around him that I wish were played down, but his performance was great. Yeah. Did you? Yeah,
I would agree with that
as well.
I was sort of surprised at how cartoonishly clowny he got at moments. But I did like I like the drool, and I like the way like one of his eyes would kind of just like drift.
Oh, so good.
So weird.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah.
So that was
I thought that was CG, because sometimes they do enhance the color of his eyes so it looks fake. But I saw some interview where he says he has a lazy eye, and if he just kind of relaxes it, it just starts to drift off to the side.
I assumed there was CG as well. That's amazing.
Thing. Yeah.
Oh, that's so cool.
And I love that, because it made you feel like this is a mask. This is a fake humanoid face that he's wearing, you know. And I liked that aspect to his performance. As I said, that you could sense there was something within that was far more evil than just a clown. You know?
Yeah. You also mentioned that the interactions between the children were one of your favourite parts. I did like most of it, but I did think the kid from Stranger Things, who in this is sort of cast as like the comic relief that's always wisecracking and making dirty jokes, didn't work that well for me. I found like most of his stuff didn't get a laugh, or it kind of just felt a bit forced. There was a couple of lines that sort of were funny, but maybe it's a hangover from seeing him as the like innocent one from Stranger Things. It was hard for me to switch him into the different character in this, but I'm curious if that specifically his character worked for you, given that you like the rest of them.
Yeah, it did work for me. His that's obviously his character in the book is the wisecracking comic relief. I thought he was actually one of my favorites when I first came out of the film. I was speaking about that to my wife after we saw it, that he was one of the best performances, I think. I've laughed at almost everything he said. So it worked for me. Him and Eddie, the hypochondriac kid. He had such a really good sort of...
He was pretty funny. I liked that
performance as well.
I liked him.
Yeah. I thought they were all quite good. I think Bill as the lead, you know, he's perhaps the most kind of straight-laced character. He has a stutter, but he did a good job as sort of the leader of the group. Another huge highlight is Bev. I can't remember the actor's name, but she has to deal with some really dramatic stuff with her dad, and getting picked on at school as well, and also sort of having the confidence and being a bit of a tomboy and hanging out with the guys. And I thought they handled that really well, and her performance was really strong. I can see her going on to being like quite a big superstar.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think she was the best out of them. Yeah, I didn't have a problem with any of the other performances. It was just specifically the comic timing or just the nature of his dialogue didn't work. Having said that, though, I did like the fact that most of their dialogue was quite sweary and like it felt the way like true to the way kids of that age would talk without adults around.
Yeah, I think so too. Yeah, it felt when they weren't obviously having to deal with the horror side, when it was just them hanging out and stuff, it felt pretty natural, which is a hard thing to do.
So I'm also curious if this was just something they didn't have time for, but the stuff that I liked about the townsfolk being weird and this kind of like undercurrent of evilness within the town. Maybe, like I said, maybe this is going to be explored in the sequel, which actually, just quick side note, I hated that to be continued in chapter 2 or whatever at the end of the film. That made me so angry. It's just like such a cheap, I don't know, it's like, I wish they just left it as one film and then you have a second, I don't know, it just feels like what we often complain about just see how one goes before you sign up for it. I know the book is in 2 parts and it makes sense to do 2, and that was always sort of part of the plan, but I don't know, just the way it was kind of like this stinger surprise at the end just annoyed me. Anyway, my original question is the evil sense of the town, or is it explained in the book, or will it be explained, I suppose, why some of the townsfolk are weirdos, like, or seem to be in on? Is it just the town is evil, or is there more to it than that? Because I didn't quite get why some of them seemed almost complicit, or like the creepy librarian lady, which I loved, but logically didn't quite know how it all fit together.
Yeah, I think the movie doesn't quite get it across, and it's hard. It is in the books, and the book is massive and obviously has time to go into stuff like that. So the idea is that Pennywise has an effect on the whole town, and he's been there since before it was colonized, basically. Yeah, and the adults don't realize it. It all feels normal at first, but the more you look, the more messed up it is. And there is sort of a malaise on the adults that they let things happen and they don't worry as much as they should about how many kids go missing and things like that. Right. Yeah, and there's lots of PrePost and stuff. It's
just kind of like the evilness seeping into them, I guess, because they've been there for so long or whatever. Because there is also that scene where I think one of the bullies is doing something horrific on the bridge and the car sort of drives past, and they just like the kids calling out for help, and the adults just look and then just keep driving.
Exactly.
I thought that was great.
Yeah. There's cool. I like that, and I think in the book it really speaks to the theme of being a teenager and having your group of friends and feeling like you're the only ones that really understand what you're going through, and that the adults don't get you. You know, that whole sort of teenage idea, and it's sort of almost literal in the town of Derry. So it doesn't quite come across in the movie, but they've got enough there, you know, to sort of hint that there's something weird about the adults in the town, at least. Yeah, true. I will say it doesn't work. It didn't work for me at all in the movie. One of the scenes I really didn't like, actually, was when Bill is in the garage with his dad, and he's like, I got these tunnels and I can find...
I totally agree.
And the dad just instantly is like, he's dead, shut up, clean up this shit. It just felt way too much too soon, and you didn't get any sense of their relationship, or that the dad was even upset, really.
Completely agree.
Yeah, it just felt off. That scene felt really off.
It's very strange, and it makes his performance seem terrible, the dad. I mean, maybe because it feels so out of context or something, I don't know. Or maybe it's meant to be like they were going for something weird, but it doesn't work. You're so right. It's such a weird scene. Yeah. It does not fit.
And so early too. Yeah. I was a bit worried at that point. I was like, well, I hope it's not all like this.
Yeah. So are you excited for chapter 2 now that we've seen chapter 1?
Yeah, I am. I think if it's as solid as this adaptation, they'll make a really good little pair of movies together. So yeah, I'm really excited. I'm curious because less stuff kind of happens in the adult storyline, so there's more for them to fill in, and I don't know whether that's good or bad. Whether the instincts in this movie that we didn't like as much, like some of the scares and things like that, whether they will be enhanced or lessened in the next movie, and whether they'll sort of take some of the feedback from what people are saying. Because I think there is a general consensus that it's good, but it's not really scary. And I wonder whether they'll sort of tweak a couple of ideas and techniques in the well, I guess you call it a sequel, part 2. But yeah, I am excited, and I do think, like, I know that you didn't like the title at the end, but I like that they still just made this, and there was no green light for the sequel. You know, they had an outline, and they'd sort of been working on the script, but it wasn't a sure thing at all, and they waited to see the huge box office numbers, and then it was sort of a go-ahead. So I would, in my sort of, the leeway that I'm giving to the movie, I would see that as they were optimistic at the end. They weren't trying to shove it down your throat, maybe. Yeah.
True. That would have been I guess it would be pretty awkward if this bombed and then they didn't make a chapter.
Yeah, super awkward. Yeah. There's just one chapter.
Yeah.
Are you looking forward to part 2?
Yeah, I think so. Like, given the amount of fun that I had with this film, I'd gladly see a second part.
Yep.
I'm curious. I mean, like I said, I hope that they would flesh out more of just that weirdness about the town, given that was my favourite sort of aspect of this film. So
they'll have more time to. So, fingers crossed.
From what you're saying, that gives me, I'm optimistic about that. It gives me some hope. But yeah, I imagine it will be a similar kind of just fun, gory thrill ride, and I'm up for that, especially if it looks as good as this one did. It's good.
Yeah,
fun couple of hours in the cinema.
Yeah, absolutely. And you touched on this earlier, but the fact that it's had a quite a high budget and it's been received very well and doing well, I think that's good for the industry and good for sort of Hollywood horror, because we might get more stuff like this, and studios might take a chance on something like Guillermo del Toro was trying very hard to make a Lovecraft movie, and he just kept getting turned down because he needed quite a big budget for it, and now this might open the door for exciting projects like that. So I think that's a good outcome. Yeah, I really hope that he tries again now, because that would be awesome. And before we sort of wrap up, I think it's worth mentioning that I don't know if you've seen this, Matt, but there's a short kind of YouTube series that talks about the differences between the Cary Fukunaga script and this movie. And it's really interesting to hear the differences. I think we touched upon this in the trailer thoughts, but Cary Fukunaga, who directed all of first season True Detective, was attached to this to write and direct, and he wrote a few drafts of the script and was very much involved. I didn't know, but for 4 years he worked on pre-production for this, and then got the can, which sucks. But his take was much more in the vein of something like The Shining, where almost ignoring a lot of the source material and just taking what you like and then turning it into your own sort of artistic horror sort of film. And of course we don't know how that would have turned out, but I would recommend people watch that. I can't remember what it's called, but if you just type in...
it's on our PrePost Twitter account, actually. I tweeted that out a couple of days ago. Yeah.
Just check out the Twitter
there. There you
go. Did you get a chance to watch it?
I did, yes.
Cool.
It's fascinating, Really, really interesting stuff.
Yeah, really, really fascinating. Yeah.
And does make me sad that we'll never get to see that version of the film.
Yeah, same. Yeah.
So overall, both positive, much better than The Dark Tower, fun time in the cinema.
Heck yeah. Yeah, for sure.
And both looking forward to part 2, sounds like.
Yeah, absolutely. I think for anyone listening, well, you've spoiled yourself, but if you haven't seen it, go and check it out. I could almost recommend this to most people, I think, because it's graphic at times, but it's not, as we say, it's not really unsettling or scary, and it is more of a sort of fun horror experience. So,
yeah.
And I guess that's why it's doing so well at the box office.
I agree.
But yeah, excited for part 2.
Cool. Thanks for listening to the Pre-Post Film Review. We'd love to hear what you guys thought of it. Did you like it, like John and myself did, or were you underwhelmed? Let us know. You can email us at prepostfilmreview@gmail.com. We try to reply to all our emails, so yeah, we'd love to hear from you guys. Send us a message.
Yeah, please do. You can send us a little poem too, like Ben sends to Bev. And, that would be lovely. You can also give us a like on Facebook if you want to. That would be great. You can find us on Twitter as well, at PrePostFR. And yeah, if you go there, you can see the videos we were talking about, or we might cut that, and then therefore you cut this line as well. We're also on iTunes and Stitcher and all your favourite podcast servers. So if you can give us a subscribe there, and particularly on iTunes, if you want to write a little review for the show, that would be much appreciated. So thanks in advance.
Thank you. We're also on Letterboxd. You can find links in the show notes to our accounts to check out what we've been watching outside of the pod. And join us next episode when we're going to be talking about the sequel to Blade Runner 2049. Directed by our old mate, Denis Villeneuve.
Yes. Villeneuve. Good pronunciation.
Thanks. Had a lot of practice.
This new director came in, I'm forgetting his name, but he has directed Mama, what was it called? That
Yeah, Mama, you're right.
Mama, yeah, which I haven't seen. Did you see that?
I have, actually.
Great.
It's not very good. Yeah. I mean, it's okay. It's not horrible. But...
Yeah.
Well, actually, apparently it is. I gave it 1.5 stars. Shows how good my memory is.